Welcome to Writing to Be Free. It's been a while, so from the last video, if you've been following along, you know that according to James Pennebaker, he recognized that this writing process, this 4-day writing challenge, could be a very daunting experience, and so the best thing to do is to take a break, 2 to 3 days, which is what we've done, and now we're ready to start to process that writing experience. We want to analyze the experience itself and see what we've learned, have we grown in that experience, and then we also want to see, what do we do now? What are the next steps after that? So the first thing I want to say is if you've come back, welcome back. That means you were at least curious about your analyzing the experience, or you really did find a benefit and you want to keep going. Either way, I'm glad to see you came back. And I missed you guys. So welcome back. And also, did you notice anything different? Now that you've been away from the writing, you set it aside for a little bit of time. Think about any of these things, and had you experienced any of these things either since you started writing or once we've been on this little bit of a break? Feeling more positive emotions, easier to laugh, easier to fall asleep, less alcohol. You can keep going down the list. I can say for me, I miss the writing itself. After the writing challenge ended, I mean, life just went on. Same busy schedule, same stressors, and people pulling at me from different directions. And I missed because I didn't intentionally carve out time for myself. And I definitely missed that. And the writing challenge forced me to carve out time for me. So I definitely noticed that difference and feeling a little bit more frazzled, a little bit more stressed because I didn't take that time for myself. So did you notice anything different? And maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Just because you didn't experience a lot of positive benefits doesn't mean you aren't moving further along in your healing process. We're going to go through what Pennebaker says about how to analyze your writing, and maybe you can see the benefits there as we go through it. On the other hand, did you feel worse once you started writing about your experience, your trauma, your emotions? Did you experience negative emotions? And as I've said before, it's not uncommon. It's actually to be expected that while you're writing, just after you're writing, you may feel a little bit sad. But now I'm talking about something bigger than that, deeper than that. Deep depression, self-destructive thoughts, dangerous thoughts. That is a red flag where I would say that you may need to talk to someone. A small percentage of people experience that. And it's not bad if you experience these things. It's just your body and your mind letting you know that there are some areas that you need to work on. That's all it is. And it's good to know that instead of going out and being triggered and not being aware. So as always, I include in the description section some links if you don't know where to go or who to reach out to get connected to some help. I have included some links in the description section so you can check that out. Most people don't experience that degree, but it is something that can happen. But don't feel bad if that is your experience. It's just, again, like I said, an indication from your mind and your body that maybe you are now ready to move to another level of processing and trying to deal with through counseling, through therapy, maybe even through medication to deal with those issues, and then continue on in your healing journey. Okay, so now for everyone else, let's start to analyze the writing itself. So when we first started I said for some of you, you may not feel comfortable or may not have felt comfortable keeping your writings around. Um, and so for you, you may have destroyed your writing. So some of this may be harder for you. You may just be relying on your memory. But others of you who kept your writings, who saved your responses to the 5 questions after each writing. We're going to go through now and analyze and see what all that means, okay? And as well as some other side topics that can also help us in processing the writing. And I encourage you, even after this is over, if you continue with therapeutic writing, part of the benefit is going back and looking at it. So there's benefit in actually doing the writing itself, but there's also additional benefits by going back and processing it and seeing how you are progressing in this process. Okay, so let's first look at the numbers. So if you recall, it hasn't been that long ago, we've always been using this chart from Penny Baker's book. And he gives us these questions, and he asks you to rate your responses from 0, not at all the way up to 10, a great deal. What was your experience based on these questions? And as always, I will stress that this is not a right or wrong. It's not good or bad. Whatever you score is just a gauge. It's just a thermometer to see where you are. And so if you had saved your scores or what you wrote down for each of the days that we did the writing challenge, now we're going to go back and see and compare how, how those writings progress. So starting with the first question, you see here that I have the question like always, and then I went back and pulled it in my scores, what I wrote down for each of the days for day 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for that first question of to what degree do you express your deepest thoughts and feelings, you can see day 1, I scored a 9. I scored myself a 9, day 2, 8, and then 8. And again, this is not, wow, you did so great because you did a 9. That's just where I was. And that suggests if you were at 8 or higher, that you were very expressive in your writing, that you weren't holding back, that you were expressing a lot. If you were 5 or below consistently for this question, it suggests that maybe you were holding back to some degree, that you weren't fully going for it or fully expressing. There could be lots of reasons for why. It could be that the subject matter that we were writing about was something that you just did not feel comfortable opening up and talking about or writing about. It could be that just therapeutic writing isn't for you, but just something to be aware of. So, how did you score yourself? So, for me, like I said, I really wanted to give this a try. I really wanted to see the benefits. So, I gave it my all. Also, I don't really worry about people reading my writing or anybody stumbling upon these things. So, I didn't feel any kind of guardedness as to someone stumbling upon it and reading my deepest secrets. So I felt very free to express, and I wanted to get the most out of it. So if you found yourself in that 8, 9, 10 range, that's probably where you were. If you were below 5, it probably suggests that either we were writing about something that you weren't comfortable with opening up fully for whatever reason, and that may be something that you want to explore further, either through more therapeutic writing or maybe through talking to a counselor or a therapist to talk about these areas. Always remember, our goal is to be free. We want to move on to our next healing journey. So maybe you've realized, hey, this is something I need to explore further. This is something that I'm resistant on, and maybe I want to go deeper into this to figure out why, because I don't want anything to hold me back. Okay, so that's the first question. Um, to what degree did you currently feel sad or upset? So you can see my trend here. I started out at 7, and that was that first day when we talked about whatever trauma or experience that was pressing on us most right now. And it was really the opening where we were putting it all out there. And that was the day I probably cried the most. So you can see that I was a 7 on that day. After that, I got a lot out. I got a lot out that first day. So I was a 2 on the second day, and then 0, 0. I wasn't sad, and I recall that in the last 2 days of writing, I was feeling a lot more optimistic. I was feeling a lot more hopeful. So at the conclusion of those days of writing, I was in a better place. I was in a happy place. Again, if that's not where you were, not bad, not good, just where you were. So I would say that if you saw a pattern there, you felt good the whole time. So you are zeros all the way across. That's good. That's a gauge to show where you are, um, as well as talking about or writing about some difficult matters that you're at a level of healing that it doesn't really trigger you or bother you this much. If you were on the other end, 7, 8, 9, 10, um, not surprising. We were writing about some very difficult subject matter. So just to gauge, just to see where you were. To what degree do you currently feel happy? And you can see a pattern here. For me, that first day I cried a lot. I put it all out there, so I was at a 2. But by the end, by day 4, again, I was really in a hopeful place. I had brought my writing full circle, and you didn't have to do it this way, but I started out on day 1 talking to the little girl who had experienced that abuse and trying to honor her. And then by day 9, day 9, by day 4, I had gone back and tried to tie it all together, because that's what we were encouraged to do in day 4. And I was feeling a lot more hopeful and optimistic. So yeah, I was happy on that day. So I could definitely see a pattern. Um, Again, we're just taking a temperature. We're just using this as a thermometer to see where we were. And were you seeing progress? Was the writing, as you went further, were you feeling better? Was it making you more and more sad each day that you wrote? That's something to pay attention to. And it may suggest that, one, maybe you need to go into therapy, or maybe you need to talk to someone, or find a self help book to help you work through those things. Or it could suggest that therapeutic writing isn't for you. That's all. All right. And then the last question: to what degree was the writing valuable or meaningful for you? I was pretty high-ish. I'll say it that way. The first day, I put it all out there. It was an 8. Second day was the lowest day, and I think for me, I I hadn't really learned anything that I didn't know already, so I didn't find it that meaningful for me. But then I was a 7.5 or 7.5 and an 8. I did find value, and I always find value when I process my experiences. I never feel like there's a benefit to just talking about what happened, bad things that happened in the past, but I always try to learn something from it, or try to find a positive in that. And to me, that is meaningful and valuable. If all I was doing was just rehearsing the bad things that happened to me, then yeah, I would probably be depressed. I would probably be sad. And maybe for some of you, that's where you were, and your numbers didn't really change. But we're actually going to talk about what you could do to see more progress. So stay with me. Don't go anywhere yet. Just stay with me. Again, we're just taking a temperature. We're just taking a gauge to see where we are. And feel free to put in the chat where you were. What were your scores? If you go back and note down the numbers, put them in the chat, and we can look at that together if you want. So those were the numbers, but there are other things we can do with this information, and that can give us a little bit more insight into where we are in our healing journey. So we actually want to analyze the writing as well. So first thing we want to talk about is your actual writing style. If you hand wrote your responses, I think you can get a little bit more from this stage. Looking at your handwriting itself, was it very neat and tidy? Which may suggest that in the back of your mind, you're thinking about someone else could be possibly reading this. So you're paying attention to it, making sure there are no grammatical errors. You're crossing out things. Whereas if you're more relaxed and expressive, you don't care. You're not worried about how neat the presentation is because you're the only one that's going to read it. So you're not worrying about if you made a spelling mistake or anything like that. You're just letting it flow. And sometimes when you let it flow, it comes out really sloppy and messy. Um, Whereas where you're trying to control it, if you're trying to be in control, your writing may be very neat and you're paying attention to making sure you spell things right and you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. But we want to let go. That's where you see the benefit of the expressive writing. That's where you're tapping in into the emotions and into the healing. If you're still focusing on how it looks and how it presents to others, you haven't really tapped into that side. So again, you may not see the benefits until you are able to let go. If you type this, again, pay attention to, when you type something on the computer and you make a lot of spelling mistakes and it highlights those in blue. How much blue is on your document? How much blue or how much red, showing how many grammatical and spelling errors there are. If there's a lot, that's actually a good thing, said the professor. Yes, that's good because it shows that you're not concerned about it being perfect or who may see all these mistakes. You're just flowing. Okay, so that's something to pay attention to, is as a gauge for how expressive you were in your writing, was just how does it look presentation wise. Another thing you can focus on is the degree of emotions that you expressed in your writing. And what do I mean by that? Expressing negative emotions. When you go back through your writing, how much or how many negative words did you use in your writing? So when I went back, I had these highlighters here, and I went back through and I highlighted every place where I used negative words. So um, when we talk about negative words, especially for those of us who've been through trauma, words like trauma, anger, hostile. I'm going to pull mine up right here if it doesn't fight me. And I'll just call out some of the things that I highlighted in green. Tears, frustrated, survival, sacrifice, sorry. Those are some of the negative words that I used throughout my 4 days of writing. And Penny Baker acknowledges that for many of us, we never really had the chance to talk about those negative things. We were discouraged from talking about the negative. We didn't want to reflect badly on the family or a loved one, so we were told to keep that to ourselves. Or as women, sometimes we're told, to be positive and not focus on the negative. So for many of us, we've had to kind of keep that part quiet or suppressed. But we need to acknowledge those negative things. We can't pretend it didn't happen. We can't pretend that we didn't feel anger or feel frustration. But what Penny Baker adds is that we shouldn't stay there. We shouldn't get stuck there. So we need to acknowledge negative emotions, but we don't want to dwell on that. So when I looked at my going back to my journal here, when I looked at the negative things, day one I found, and I didn't go through and count everyone. I was kind of glossing through it and highlighting as it stuck out to me. There are probably more, but this is what I came up with. 10 negative words I saw in my day one writing. And I noticed a pattern that there would be a lot of negative words early and then they would kind of fade out towards the end. So 10 on day one, 8 on day two, 7 on day three, and 7 on day four. So again, not good, not bad, just where are you? So if you go back through your writing, I would suggest using different highlighters if you have them, or circle all the negative words that you used to describe your experiences in general. And just pay attention to that. And did you see a pattern there? Were there more on certain days, less on others? Was it getting more or less? Were there certain subjects where there were a lot of negative words being used versus other areas where it was much more positive? So just pay attention to that. We want to acknowledge it. We just don't want to get stuck there. Um, but if you do find a lot and there is no variation in it, it's not lessening, it's pretty pervasive throughout, it could be a sign of depression. So again, um, sometimes we're depressed and we don't even realize it. Is that true? Yeah. Sometimes we can be depressed and just with the busyness of life, or we've been depressed for so long, it just feels like that's our normal. Um, but it may be, again, a warning sign that you need to talk to someone. All right. On the other side, he talks about positive emotions and writing out positive. The more the merrier. So where negative emotions, we need to acknowledge them. We don't want to dwell there, but the more positive, the better. But we don't want to be fake, right? You don't want to just pretend and be merry sunshine when things aren't happy. But to the extent that you can find positives, write about that. I think that's important. So when I go back and look at my writings, I highlighted those. Where's my highlighter? It was in yellow, which I can't find right now. But I used my yellow highlighter for that one. And what I found was that on day one, I found 11 positive words. So some of them were good moments. That was one. Light shining, great, abundance, enjoy. It's another good one. Fullness, satisfied, strength. So those were some of the words. And day one, I had 11 positive words, 10 on day two, 9 on day three, and 20. Look at that, 20 on day four. And that was the day, remember, the last day, I was feeling probably the most optimistic and most hopeful. And I think that reflects in the writing itself that I had 20 and it was spread throughout, pretty much dispersed throughout the writing were positives. So, to the extent that in future writings, if you can try to look for positive, even if you're writing about something that could be very weighty and very sad, see if you can find a positive in there. And what studies have found is that just finding three good things to talk about or write about can help boost your mood. So just even finding three things in the midst of, like I said, I've been through abandonment, child abuse. I've been there. I've had a lot of negative experiences in my life, but even with that, I mean, I work at it. I work at trying to find the positives, and it does help. It definitely does help. So look for that in your writing and see if you can highlight those in your past writings from the challenge, but be aware of that as you're doing your future writings. Again, not to be fake and not to make something that was bad and just pretend it was good, but see if you can find a silver lining somewhere in there, something good to say about that. For example, a family that lost their home in a flood. That's a horrible thing, but they realized how the community supported them and how many people that they didn't even know cared about them showed up for them. Or they realized that, yeah, we lost some property, but we recognized that the most important thing is that we still had each other. So that sounds like a movie, but it's a real thing. And even in the darkest of times, there can be bright moments, and so be on the lookout for that and see if you can incorporate that into your writing. um, and then another thing that he talked about is focusing on constructing a story. So not just sitting down. So one of the big differences between just journaling and therapeutic writing is the intention of it. That you're trying to construct a story as you're writing. And by story, I'm not saying make up something, but you're trying to piece things together and make sense of it. That's what we mean by constructing a story. So one of the things you want to be on the lookout for are the use of causal words. So what are causal words? Things like cause or effect or because, or the reason this happened was, or my rationale for doing this. So that shows that as you're writing, you're trying to understand, you're trying to process, you're trying to make sense of things. So we're not just writing about what happened, we're trying to make sense of it. So be on the lookout for causal words, and try to incorporate that into your writing. And then also insightful words. Insightful words. So look for words like I understand or I understood, I realize this, I know this, um, the meaning of this or this meant this. I also added to that, so something small, or if. That shows that you're trying to make connections, which I would put in the causal side. So when I go through my writing, now that I went and I had my pink pen for that. Um, and looking at my writing, going back into mine, for causal words, day one, I had 4, 3 for day 2, and then 5 and 5 for day 3 and 4. So not a lot, but again, I was just skimming. I wasn't like intentionally hunting every sentence. But I would say that I wasn't necessarily trying to make connections. By the end, especially on the last day when he was telling us, try to tie things up and wrap things up, then I really did try, and that's why I had 5. So it really wasn't my focus. But now that I'm aware of that, and the reason that we didn't talk about these things before you started writing is because the first step is just to start writing, and you don't want to write and have all those things in your head the first time through. We just want to get used to just writing and being open and not trying to follow a bunch of rules. But now that we're understanding how to process or analyze our writing, we can try to incorporate that into our writing. And here, the emphasis on um, the emphasis here is on constructing a story. Construction is important, and studies have shown people that had the most causal and insightful words show the greatest improvement in their physical health. Show the greatest improvement in their physical health, blood pressure, immune system disorders, and all of those things. That's where you saw the benefit. People who were able to make those ties, try to make those connections and understand and whatever happened, processing whatever happened. Um, People who don't, um, why don't they? Why don't they? And I think for me also, because I've had therapy in the past, what Penny Baker found is that for some people, they already have a story already written in their head. So when you sit down to write, you've already worked through certain things. And so you're really just reciting things that you've already told yourself or narrated for yourself. So you've already written the story and you're just writing it down here. You've already pieced through this, you've already worked through that. So there's not a real benefit for you because these are things you've already processed. But here, the emphasis is on the construction. So you want to be growing in the writing, and you grow through constructing. You're building something from each day that you're writing, you're building, you're growing. If all you're doing is just reciting things that you already know or believe, there's no real growth there. So you're not as likely to see benefits, not as likely to see the emotional benefits or the physical benefits versus someone who's actually, while they're doing this writing process, they're learning things, they're discovering, they're piecing together and making sense out of things. That's going to be important. So you just want to make sure that you are constructing. So what do you do then if you had therapy, you've been in and out of therapy, so you kind of worked through a lot of these things. So yeah, you were reciting things and you weren't really having revelations in that moment. One thing you can think about is changing your perspective as you're doing the therapeutic writing, changing your perspective, writing from a different point of view. So one thing to begin this process, going through your original writings, your 4 days of writing, and looking for use of first person singular pronouns. I, me, mine, myself. When I went through and did that, day one, I found 16 of these personal first person singular pronouns. 33 on day two. 33. 20, and then on day 4, 10. And I think 16 on day one and 10 on day 4. Remember, from my writing, I was writing a lot to the little girl in me who had experienced the abuse. So there was a lot of writing to that person. So not as much I writing there, but the rest of it was all me. And at first I was like, why didn't you tell me that before? So I wouldn't have used so much I would have been trying to write from other perspectives. But again, he didn't want us to be tainted by all that. He didn't want us to have all these rules in our head when we write for the first time. He just wanted us to write. But now it's something to keep in mind that if you find yourself not really learning things or discovering things about yourself through this therapeutic writing, you could consider changing your perspective and writing from a different point of view. It could be just writing in like the third person instead of saying I did this. Write about yourself from a third person, like she, he, whatever. That can put a little bit of distance and give you another point of view. You could write from a significant person in your life, like a parent or uh, a loved one, a sibling, an abuser. You can write from different perspectives. That way you could write from God's perspective or someone you admire. How do they see your situation? Write it from that. You can learn a lot here. So there are a lot of benefits to writing from a different point of view. One, it can increase your understanding because you've only looked at it through your lens, your experience, and your eyes. But now you're trying to step outside of yourself and see it from another person's point of view. How's that saying go? There's two sides to every story. So by looking at it from another point of view, you may see things. You take yourself out of it. You take your emotions and your perceptions out of it and look at it from another point of view. You may learn something that you weren't aware of. So that leads you to some revelations about yourself. Also, because now you're writing from a different perspective and you're not in that I perspective, it can take away some of the sting, the emotional impact of that writing, because whatever you're writing about is not you, it's someone else, an outside perspective looking at those things. So the sting of it, the pain, the anxiety, the fear, the anger can be dulled a little bit. Plus, writing the same thing over and over again can kind of take away the sting of it as well. Um, Also, changing perspectives can advance your healing again because you're making new connections, you're seeing things from a different point of view, you're learning new things. It can help you just understand what happened um, from a different perspective and give you more insight and more growth. It can also help you with forgiveness, looking at it from another point of view. Maybe you see your role in whatever situation, or maybe you see the other person who you saw as the enemy. Maybe you can see it from their side, and maybe it's not as bad as what you thought. I'm just throwing out just different suggestions. It's all going to be relative to whatever situation that we're talking about. But looking at it from another lens can help with forgiveness, which can definitely help with your healing and releasing a lot of stress and tension in your body. Hope that makes sense. If not, feel free to email me or reach out through the chat. Okay. But the point here is that changing your perspective, we see a lot of growth because now you are making those connections and now you are constructing a story, not just reciting the same thing you've been telling yourself, the same narrative that you've been telling yourself for years. Okay. As always, we want to be paying attention to our self-care, even when we do this analysis type of thing. Um, you want to pay attention to how you're feeling and have already in place a plan for how you're going to care for yourself. I'm going to give you guys, if you want it, a self-care guide, a personal self-care guide. So if you email me, I will send you this personal self-care guide. And what it is, um, a way to just analyze your own life and figure out what are the things that can be most helpful for you in caring for yourself. For many of us, we are so focused on taking care of other people, we don't really take the time to take care of ourselves. So even though you hear the term self care thrown around a lot, we don't really know what that means for us. And maybe for one person, doing yoga and having massages is very much caring for themselves, but for you that may not be the case. So you need to figure out, what is self-care for me? What makes me feel safe? What makes me feel loved or nurtured when I'm afraid? What reassures me when I'm feeling anxious? What calms me down? Who are the people I can reach out to when I'm feeling sad or depressed? So this is a guide that will help you process that for yourself. And I encourage you, as you continue on your healing journey, you can pull it out and you already have at your fingertips a list of ways to take care of yourself. So that's available to you. If you email me, I can get that to you. All right, so we have now analyzed and been through everything that we need, and so we need to figure out, what are we going to do next. Um, so for some of you, you may feel like, okay, it was all right, but I didn't really get that much out of it, and I'm done. And that's okay. I'm not offended. And for some of you, you may have found some benefit, but you got a lot of benefit. You don't really need anything to work on right now. That's okay too. James Pennybaker talks about that. In a perfect world for him, if you're feeling good and you don't need it, don't do it. Put it aside. And then when you need it, come back to it. That's great. Well, others may feel like, I want to keep writing because I just want to do maintenance. I want to keep up. I want to keep up with it just to make sure I'm good. That's good too. It's all good. I would say, um, make that decision for yourself. Take a moment and really think about and reflect on what works for you. If you didn't feel like you got a lot of benefit from it, but now that we have done the analysis section, you may want to go back through the 4-day challenge and apply some of the things that we've talked about in this video to that and see if you get any type of benefit. I always say that, to the extent that you see any benefit, it all goes by how much you put into it. So you get out of anything whatever you put into it. So if I went to the gym and I got my weights out and I did this, all right, I don't have sculpted arms, so this sucks. I'm not doing this anymore. Yeah, but did you really try? Did you put anything into it? Now, if I go to the gym and I got this weight ugh, and I'm doing it 3 reps of 10, 5 days a week, yeah, after a while, I'm going to have some guns on me, right? So you get out of anything what you put into it. So um, when you look at your scores, if you can ask yourself, were you really invested in it? And if you really were, but you didn't see the benefit, again, it may not be for you. It's not for everyone. But if you did see benefits, or if you want to try again, keep going, keep writing. I said at the beginning of this process that I started because I wanted to do some research for my class that I'm going to develop. And it was very helpful on that level. And one thing it taught me is, there's more I want to know before I create this class. And there's more I want to know from you guys as I create this class. So I need to do some more research. I'm not quite ready yet to launch the class. It will be helpful for me though if you email me or you put in the chat, like, what do you want to know? What would be more helpful for you? Are there certain areas of writing that you want to focus on? Are there certain topics that you want to focus on? Give me that, and that will help me in trying to figure out how to shape this class, because the class is coming. It's coming. It's just about, how do I make it the best and most beneficial for the most people? And you guys can be the ones to tell me that. So, that being said, I'm still going to keep making videos because, like I said, I really found a lot of benefit, and it forced me to have to take time out for myself. So I'm going to continue with videos. I have a whole list of things I want to talk about and write about. And so hopefully you continue to join me on the journey. Subscribe to the videos and you'll see more of these. Share them with your friends. If you know someone that you think could benefit from it, feel free to share this. And this is how we're going to get free. This is how we're going to move on in our healing journey. We're going to write our way to freedom. So this is all for today. And it was good to see you. And I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.